Will Robinson here from Robinson's Auto, toolsandtime.com. Welcome back. Today in the shop, we have a 2000 GMC with the 7.4 big block. She had a couple issues, but the one we're going to tackle now, and hopefully I'll give you a good demonstration on how I go about troubleshooting an issue like this, because it's pretty common on these older trucks. They would have a hard time starting after they got hot. So you drive it somewhere, you park it, you go back out, start it up, just cranks, you cycle the key, and then she'll fire off. Usually that's a sign that your fuel pressure is leaking down as it's sitting. And then you have to reprime the fuel rail to get enough fuel up there to, cycle the injectors and get yourself to start. So we're gonna go in there, we're gonna verify the fuel pressure. We're also gonna do a little leak down test. Somebody's already replaced the fuel rail. I believe the fuel rail. Definitely the fuel injectors, fuel pressure regulator valve, fuel pump. So somebody's been here. So let's go see what we got going on. For starters, take and remove the cover from your Schrader valve. This is a port where you can hook up a fuel pressure gauge, and it'll work good on this model, this method. We got an adapter. This is going to be a digital fuel pressure gauge, a pressure diag they call it. We're going to hook this up to the fuel rail, and see right there, when I screwed that on, no gas squirted out. Hubby Tools, I believe that's how it's pronounced. We're going to plug the sensor in. You can see we have a lot of options here, but I'm going to check fuel pressure. Now I'm going to cycle the key. That's once. What do we got? Oh wow, that leaked down quick. Looks like we hit a max of 55 and it's already down to 13. Did it really leak down that quick? Yeah, well, you can see just an amount of time it takes me to walk back here. You can see the fuel pressure drop. It'll prime, go up, and then the fuel pump will shut off, and you shouldn't see it dropping down like this. So we have one of three things going on here. Brought you over to the whiteboard just to give you a demonstration of where my mind's going. I want to start by saying I am not an artist, so this is just a rough drawing, nothing detailed. But say I'm going to start back by the gas tank. All right. Somewhere in here you'll have a sending unit, you'll have a supply. This is where your pump and everything's going to be. So we'll call this pump. All right, that's going to be your supply out. That's only going to go in that direction. All right, this is going to be your return. This can only flow in this direction. This one, the check valve, is located usually somewhere in the pump, or most times in the pump assembly, in the sending unit itself. But there's a check valve or some kind of backflow preventer. Once everything's off, it keeps the fluid from returning its pressure back to the tank through the fuel pump. Okay, so we're gonna stick with the supply. Sorry, this thing's running a little low. This is gonna be the fuel rail, but I'm just gonna come right back. Hopefully this is enough to see it. So remember, direction of flow. Returning back. So this is a V8, so you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fuel injectors, right? So one of your problems could be one of these fuel injectors down here might have a little leak and you're losing pressure while it sits. But there's one thing that we forgot to add to this drawing, and that's pretty much the fuel pressure regulator valve. So I'll just put reg. So what this does, it's almost like another check valve that allows pressure only above a certain limit to return back to the tank. So say if this is a for example, we'll just say 50 PSI, it'll allow all the pressure over that to leak back to the tank, to slowly go back to the tank. So a couple of things that can make your fuel pressure leak off is this guy. Any one of these fuel injectors leaking, or the non-return valve in the fuel pump. For this next demonstration, I'm coming back here to the fuel pump. I'm going to disconnect the hose going back to the fuel tank. And what you'll see me do is block this off. It's going to be plugged off here. It won't be able to return to the tank. So everything, as long as all these fuel injectors are good and sealed, the pressure that we're watching up here on our gauge, when we turn it on, say if this is 60, we shouldn't see that bleed down like we were seeing earlier. It should stay relatively close. We might bleed down a little bit from the first initial injector pulse or whatnot, but we should see it stay relatively close. It may overpressure, because remember, this regulator is supposed to monitor and maintain a certain pressure within this rail. So it's going to go a little bit higher than what we've seen it with the regulator in the circuit. All right, so I got you guys back at the fuel tank. You see we have F, and then we have R. So this is the fuel pump out to the rail, and this is your return. So this is a tool you got to use to get these lines apart. So we'll put this in there. All right. Now I take this adapter I made, which is just fitting out of a fuel pressure gauge set, and a hose that I lock up. Lock that in place, make sure she's good. Now the fuel pressure will go up, go to the rail. It'll try to return, but this is blocked off. It says 0. We're going to turn the key on. You hear the fuel pump really straining back there. But what do you see now? 81 max, and the fuel pressure's pretty steady. Nothing like what we were seeing with the fuel pressure just dropping right off. So that's telling me that our fuel injectors are, for the most part, sealed pretty good. So it's not that, and that our fuel pump is capable of keeping the fuel pressure in the line, so it's not leaking back the non-return side. So something is not right with that fuel pressure regulator. I know it's been replaced. We're going to pop the manifold off, and we're going to take a closer look at even the housing. Make sure the housing's not damaged. We got to take a really close look because somebody's been here before. So what did we just confirm with that test? So we powered the ignition on, the fuel pump pressurized this rail. It couldn't return to the tank. This pressure went up and it essentially maintained. So this is all maintaining above 60 PSI. That's telling us our check valve's okay in our pump on the pressure side going out. And essentially all the injectors are testing pretty closed at the moment. If I took this off and the fuel goes into the tank and the pressure leaks down to 0 again, we must have something going on in and around this regulator. All right, guys, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take it, I'm going to unplug all the wire harnesses and move everything out of the way that's attached to the plenum. The hardest part is removing this exhaust tube that comes up to the manifold. All right, next on the back side, we're going to take and remove the coil pack along with the bracket. But we also have this little retaining bracket for the wire harness. The coil and the bracket, like so. Yeah, so we gotta try to get that fuel pressure to stop leaking back on us. At that point, we'll be okay. Same thing with these plenum bolts. They're a 1/2 inch. Taking them apart, there isn't much of a sequence. Putting it back together, we'll have to torque it. next, to get to the fuel pressure regulator, you gotta at least take off the cap. I'm pretty sure I gotta pull the distributor, unless I take the rail apart. I don't think I'm gonna do that yet. You'll see I have duct tape covering up the lower manifold. That's because the last thing you want is something to fall down in there while you're moving stuff around. Even if it's a hard piece of plastic or something, you can actually bend a valve. Take me an extra 5 minutes, but save me an extra 5 hours if something goes wrong. I don't want to take and pop that regulator apart until I relieve the fuel pressure. Oh yeah, you see how fuel came out? At this point, I got a set of snap ring pliers. As you can see, they're pretty small. Got a little bit of a right angle to them. It's going to be hard to see it. So I got the snap ring out. You see that there? Okay. That's the regulator. That's brand new. That's the O-ring that goes on the outside. Let's see if I got another little piece back here. There's also a small O-ring in here. The O-ring's there. That looks good. So everything's there. All right, I'm gonna show you what I'm doing now because I tried another regulator and it's still leaking down. But I have a vacuum pump here. It's also capable of doing pressure. So I have it switched over to pressure. I'm gonna have someone else pump this while I go up front. Yeah, we'll start with 5 PSI, but not yet. I'll tell you when. I'll show you what I did here. I got this little plug that I can push down inside. It's sealed. I can go down inside the little orifice down in there. I can seal this deep down inside. Push it in, hold it with my finger as well. And if you listen, that should be the return side. So the pressure side coming up, or the return side, shouldn't be leaking because I'm blocking the hose right where the O-ring should be. All right, Elijah, pump it. I don't know if you can hear that air. Pump it more. Try to go up to 10 with it. Is it leaking down? I think I gotta pull this regulator housing off. See if I can find anything like a crack or something inside it. This is one of those jobs where I usually give up on recording halfway through. But what I'm gonna do is I got the fuel rail off of the vehicle now. As you see, I have an O-ring. Pretty much it goes like this. Yeah, this. And we're gonna put it in just as if it's in the vehicle. Okay. I'm gonna put the snap ring back in. This is our fuel supply. I'm gonna make up an adapter here. I'm gonna put air pressure here, regulate it, and see if we're leaking by. Hopefully I get this in the frame. But there's like an outer tube and then a middle tube in there that's like pressed in. I got the center filled with water, soapy water, up to that point of that second tube. And you'll see when I pump air into it, the air is coming around the outside of that pressed in tube. The regulator seals the inner portion of that tube. So what that's telling us is that it's actually leaking by the press fit. Hold. There it goes, starts dropping. So it's not leaking, it's not the regulator that's the problem. It's the actual center portion. Let me pop this back apart and show you. I don't know if you guys can see this, but I bet you if you uncrimped this outer perimeter, this inner portion presses into the center tube. And when you put this regulator and stuff in, it seals around this pressed in piece. But however, that piece that's pressed into this lower tube is loose. Therefore, all the fluid, all the pressure coming in from this port here pressurizes the outer portion where the bigger holes are around the perimeter, waits for that to lift, and then blows down through that port, which is your return line. Essentially, it pops together like this, and this O-ring will seal that center portion. But I believe this pressed in piece is fitting loosely inside that lower tube. And when this upper portion fills up with fluid or fuel, it's leaking past inside. So the regulator is doing its job sealing it, but the tubes are leaking past one another. All right, guys, we're back. Got another fuel rail assembly with all of our parts transferred over to it. Decided we're going to use the injectors that were in the vehicle since they've been replaced. In addition, using the regulator that was in the vehicle when we first got it. Since it was brand new, it is OEM. You see it better now. We have our outer perimeter O-ring and this plastic screen, and then another O-ring. This is going to go into the body of the housing, like so. You'll feel it press in. We'll grab our snap ring pliers. Try to put this in a location where it's not too bad to get to. We'll put it in there, make sure she's seated all the way around. And now we're going to pressure test it and see how much better this one holds. Prove out our theory. Got our adapter in place. We're going to pressure test this rail. Moment of truth. There's 10, 15, 20. That's looking promising, guys. 25. Let's see if we can bring this right up to 30. A little bit past 30. And she's holding. As you've seen before, within a matter of seconds, the pressure was dropped off. Can you see the gauge? Mm-hmm. So we're gonna let this sit here for like 10 minutes, and then we'll come back, we'll check it. If everything looks good, we don't even have to let it sit for 10 minutes. We already know that it's fixed. It's not moving, it's not going nowhere. And here we are, after a few moments, still sitting a little bit above 30. I think we're gonna call it good. Let's put this back together. We got this front retaining bolt. You got one more here, one more here. And you got those two 10s in the back, your two fuel lines. You got your harness. I'm gonna leave that unplugged for now because we're gonna turn the key on and we're gonna pressurize this fuel rail to make sure this thing holds pressure. All right, turn it off. So far so good. I don't see no leaks. Turn it on. All right, key off. All right, let's see what the fuel pressure reads. Welcome back, guys. It's the next day. Last night before I left, I placed a manual gauge on there for the obvious reasons of the electronic one I was using is battery operated. I wanted to see how the pressure maintained overnight. The initial drop, I don't know if it's due to the regulator or whatnot, would go down to about 35 PSI. Anyhow, this is essentially where I found it when I came back this morning as well. So it seems to hold at least that pressure in this fuel rail now. So that's a positive sign. So at this point, we're gonna go into diagnostic. We're gonna do an auto scan. We had a lot of wires unplugged. So we're gonna have a lot of codes here that we created when we unplugged the manifold and we were checking the fuel pressure with everything unplugged. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just scan all the modules, and then I'm gonna take and do a quick clear, get everything added away. All right, so we just cleared all of our codes. I'm gonna hit OK. And I wanna go to live data. Okay, engine live data. And we're gonna look for a data PID called cam retard. Camshaft position retard. So we're gonna select that. I'm gonna start this up. We wanna set this distributor at plus or minus 2. Closer you get to 0, the better. But I believe it's plus or minus 2. We're gonna try to aim for 0. So let's start this thing up. I still have the distributor a little loose. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it up to about 2,000 RPM. I'm going to take and lock the distributor in. Next, we're going to go into special function. We're going to do the crankshaft position verification relearn. Cycle ignition off. Back on. Apply brake. Start engine. Let idle. Hit OK. Accelerate to wide open throttle. Release once fuel cutoff occurs. Okay. Learn status. Press escape. Alright, so we should be good. Guys, before I close this one out and take for a ride, I just want to make sure our cam retard still is 0. Okay, so we'll go with that. Also want to make sure our fuel pressure regulator valve's working. As I raise the RPM, the vacuum should drop. Fuel pressure should go up. Everything appears to be working. We'll monitor the decrease of drop on the fuel rail once again. And as you know before, it would drop right off on us. But I'll let this sit for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes or so. And I have a feeling it'll get down to about 30. I'm not sure where that fuel pressure regulator sits 100%, but as you can see, it pretty much maintains its fuel pressure without leaking down any longer. At this point, I just got to turn it over to the owner. So I got to get a couple more jobs in the shop, and at least at that point, they could drive it and see if we made a difference. With hopes we made a good difference, and he's happy with it. Again, this has been through a few shops trying to determine this issue, and hopefully that little underlying problem that we found helps correct it. Relieve this fuel pressure. Put a rag down here, especially on a hot engine. You just never know. Whew. We didn't have that problem before, did we, guys? Feel much better. After messing with something like this, let that evaporate out. Make sure that Schrader valve isn't leaking. This, I'll put the cap on. All right, that's gonna close this one out. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Even though it remains on the whiteboard, that truck was completed over 3 months ago, and the owner has been extremely happy. After all those years, he finally has some closure, and we dug in there. We found the problem, we took care of it, and I really appreciate you guys following along. If you haven't done so already, give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe, ring that bell so you're notified whenever I post future videos. And I really appreciate all the comments and the feedback below. I read every one of them. Thanks for watching.